Michael Peterson had spent 3 years transforming his backyard into a private paradise. What had once been a patchy lawn with a weathered deck was now an oasis that would make resort designers envious. The centerpiece was a custom-designed pool with underwater LED lighting that could shift through a spectrum of calming blues and greens, a natural stone waterfall feature that created the perfect ambient sound, and an adjoining hot tub with therapeutic jets, all meticulously maintained and surrounded by lush landscaping. The journey to this personal haven hadn't been easy. Michael had saved for years, working extra consulting gigs on weekends and holidays to fund his dream. As a software engineer who specialized in back-end infrastructure for a major tech company, he spent most days in his home office staring at lines of code, debugging systems, and navigating the stress of tight deadlines. This space represented not just a significant financial investment, nearly $85,000 when all was said and done, but his sanctuary, his daily mental health reset after long hours of intensive cognitive work. The transformation had begun shortly after he purchased the modest 3-bedroom house in Oak Ridge Estates 3 years ago. The neighborhood was perfectly situated, close enough to the city for convenience, but with just enough distance to provide tranquility. The homes were well-maintained, mid-century designs with reasonable HOA fees that promised to maintain property values without being overly restrictive, or so he had thought. Michael remembered the day he'd submitted his backyard plans to the HOA Architectural Review Committee. He'd hired a respected landscape architect who had experience working within HOA guidelines, and together they created a design that was both beautiful and compliant with all local building codes and water usage regulations. The pool utilized the latest eco-friendly filtration system, and the landscaping featured drought-resistant native plants arranged around natural stone pathways. The neighborhood HOA had initially approved his plans, though not without resistance. Several board members, particularly Walter Simmons, the then president, had expressed concerns about the extravagance of his design compared to other homes in the community. "We need to maintain a certain consistency in Oak Ridge," Walter had said during the open forum, adjusting his bow tie with obvious discomfort. "Your plans are quite ambitious, Mr. Peterson." Despite the hesitation, Michael's meticulous preparation and the architect's expert testimony had won the day. The approval came with conditions, of course: construction limited to certain hours, specific routes for contractor vehicles, and a strict timeline for completion. Michael had followed every stipulation to the letter, even bringing homemade cookies to his immediate neighbors as an apology for the temporary inconvenience. When the work was finally completed, even Walter had grudgingly admitted the result was tasteful and enhanced the neighborhood. For the past year, Michael had enjoyed his private retreat without incident. Morning swims before logging on to work, evening soaks in the hot tub under the stars, and occasional small gatherings with close friends who marveled at his backyard transformation. The space had become exactly what he'd envisioned, a personal sanctuary, where the stresses of coding and corporate demands melted away in the gentle sound of flowing water. 2 months ago, the for sale sign across the street had come down, and Diane Wilcox had moved in. Michael had initially been welcoming, bringing over a houseplant as a neighborly gesture on moving day. Diane had accepted it with a tight smile, immediately asking him if he was aware that his mailbox was 2 inches taller than the standard specified in Section 4.3 of the community bylaws. He'd laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. At 56, Diane was a recent early retiree from a career in corporate compliance at a pharmaceutical company, a background she mentioned within the first 3 minutes of any conversation. She had moved to Oak Ridge Estates following her divorce, looking for what she called a community with standards. Impeccably dressed in designer pantsuits regardless of the occasion, her ash blonde bob never showed a hair out of place, and her French manicured nails perfectly matched her pearls. Within 3 weeks of her arrival, Diane had not only joined the HOA board, but had created a new position for herself: compliance officer. Walter Simmons had stepped down as president due to health concerns, and the new president, Ted Harrison, a retired high school principal with a passion for golf and minimal interest in HOA politics, had been all too happy to let Diane take on the paperwork. The change in the neighborhood was swift and merciless. Diane conducted daily community wellness walks with a leather-bound notebook and digital camera, documenting every infraction with time-stamped photographs. She measured grass height with a ruler, photographed improperly positioned trash cans, and left violation notices for holiday decorations that exceeded the permitted dimensions by mere inches. The Rodriguez family had been fined when their 8-year-old's birthday party balloons were visible from the street for more than the maximum 4-hour festivity display permitted by guidelines. Mrs. Abernathy, a widow in her 70s, had received a formal reprimand for wind chimes that exceeded the permissible decibel level, and the Paddles had nearly entered a legal battle over their vegetable garden, which Diane had deemed an agricultural endeavor incompatible with residential aesthetics, until community pushback forced her to relent. While other neighbors grumbled but ultimately complied, replacing non-regulation mailboxes and repainting doors in approved color schemes, Michael had so far avoided Diane's direct scrutiny. His work schedule kept him mostly indoors during her inspection hours, and his front yard meticulously adhered to regulations. He'd heard her complaints at HOA meetings about excessive water usage in certain properties, but had assumed she was referring to the Johnsons' new irrigation system. That illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when Michael returned from a grocery run to find an official warning notice sealed in a plastic sleeve on his door. The form, printed on the HOA's letterhead but featuring a new compliance office stamp that hadn't existed before Diane's arrival, cited him for excessive water features visible from the street and ambient noise pollution exceeding neighborhood ambient standards. The notice further indicated that he had 10 days to submit a plan for remediation, including appropriate visual barriers and water feature sound dampening. At the bottom, in neat handwriting that matched the signature, Diane had added a personal note. "I've scheduled a compliance assessment of your backyard facilities for Thursday at 2 p.m. Please ensure access is available. Non-compliance will result in an automatic fine of $100/day." Michael stared at the paper, grocery bags still in hand, ice cream slowly melting as the California sun beat down. The privacy and peace he had carefully cultivated was suddenly under threat, and he had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning. The morning after receiving the notice, Michael composed a carefully worded email to Diane and the HOA board. He attached the original approval documents for his backyard renovation, complete with Walter Simmons' signature, along the county permits and water efficiency certifications showing his system actually used less water than traditional pools due to its advanced filtration technology. He requested that the compliance assessment be rescheduled to accommodate his work calendar and suggested an evening or weekend appointment. Diane's response came within 30 minutes. Per Section 7.2 of the HOA bylaws, approved modifications may be subject to review upon board membership changes. Your presence is not required for the inspection. If access is not provided, it will be considered non-compliance. The message was copied to all board members, none of whom responded. Reluctantly, Michael arranged to work from the kitchen that Thursday to monitor the inspection. At precisely 2 p.m., Diane arrived in pressed khakis and a polo shirt embroidered with Oak Ridge Estates HOA, a uniform no one had seen before. She spent 45 minutes taking photographs, measuring the distance from his fence to the pool, and using a decibel meter to record the sound of the waterfall. Throughout the inspection, she made disapproving notes in her leather-bound notebook, ignoring Michael's attempts at conversation through the open patio door. The next day, a 16-page compliance improvement plan appeared in Michael's mailbox outlining required modifications, including reducing the waterfall flow by 60%, installing sound dampening barriers, and limiting pool lighting to residential appropriate hours defined as no later than 8:30 p.m. on weeknights. Each requirement cited a different bylaw subsection, many of which seemed tangentially related at best to his situation. What followed was a month of increasingly intrusive behavior. Michael would be on important video calls with clients only to see Diane's face appear over his fence in the background, ostensibly checking waterfall sound levels during business hours. 3 times he caught her using a stepladder positioned against the shared neighborhood fence to peer into his yard, claiming she was monitoring compliance progress. When Michael installed privacy screens, bamboo barriers that matched his landscaping aesthetic, Diane issued a violation for unauthorized landscape modifications. When he filed a formal complaint about her repeated unannounced visits, Ted Harrison, the HOA president, simply forwarded it to Diane herself, who dismissed it as unneighborly resistance to community standard enforcement. The situation reached a new level when Diane distributed a petition to other homeowners about implementing an equitable resource usage policy that would effectively limit water feature operation to 2 hours per day. The petition falsely claimed that Michael's pool was causing water pressure issues for other residents and suggested his excessive lifestyle was out of step with community values. Many neighbors, already cowed by Diane's enforcement tactics, signed without question. Others, like the Paddles and Mrs. Abernathy, quietly reached out to Michael to offer support, but were afraid to openly oppose Diane. The Rodriguez family, still smarting from their balloon fine, were the only ones to publicly refuse to sign. Michael's attempts to address the situation through proper channels, emails to the full board, attendance at monthly meetings, even consultation with a real estate attorney, all hit the same wall: Diane's growing influence over the HOA and the general atmosphere of intimidation she had created. After a particularly frustrating conversation with Ted Harrison, who had advised him to just throw her a bone and modify something small so she can feel she's done her job, Michael began to seriously consider selling his beloved home. That night, sitting by his pool with a glass of whiskey, watching the lights reflect in the water, He wondered how one person could so thoroughly disrupt the peace he had worked so hard to create. The constant stress of Diane's harassment began taking a toll on Michael's work performance. After a particularly difficult week where he missed a critical deployment deadline, his team lead suggested he take a long weekend to recharge. Michael decided to visit his parents in San Diego, a 3-hour drive that would put welcome distance between himself and Oak Ridge Estates. Before leaving Friday afternoon, he diligently set his home security system, a precaution he'd implemented after moving into the neighborhood but had rarely needed to monitor actively. He'd installed the cameras primarily for package delivery verification and occasional wildlife sightings, like the time a family of raccoons had discovered his koi pond. The weekend with his parents was exactly what he needed. Home-cooked meals, reminiscing over old photo albums, and not a single mention of HOA bylaws or compliance regulations. By Sunday evening, as he unlocked his front door, Michael felt refreshed and determined to approach the Diane situation with renewed perspective. After unpacking and starting a load of laundry, Michael settled at his desk to prepare for the week ahead. Almost as an afterthought, he opened his security app to check if any packages had arrived during his absence. He noticed several motion alerts from his backyard camera on Saturday afternoon and clicked on the first one, expecting to see a squirrel or neighborhood cat. What appeared on his screen instead made him choke on his coffee. The footage showed Diane Wilcox at 2:17 p.m. Saturday approaching his side gate cautiously. She looked at her watch, scanned the street in both directions, then tested the gate handle. Finding it unlocked, Michael realized with a sinking feeling that in his rush to leave on Friday, he'd forgotten to secure it. She slipped inside, carrying a large beach towel and a small insulated bag. Disbelief mounting, Michael fast-forwarded through the footage. For the next hour and 20 minutes, Diane made herself completely at home in his backyard. She carefully laid her towel on one of his lounge chairs, arranged her belongings on his patio table, and methodically removed her cover-up to reveal a modest one-piece swimsuit underneath. What followed was surreal. Diane spent 30 minutes swimming laps in his pool of practice strokes, suggesting this wasn't her first aquatic exercise session. After her swim, she moved to his hot tub, adjusting the temperature controls with familiar ease. She even helped herself to a Diet Coke from his outdoor refrigerator, using a coaster from the stack he kept on the side table. Most disturbing was her complete comfort in the space. She knew where the pool temperature panel was located behind the decorative rock. She understood how to operate his hot tub jets. She even seemed to know about the hidden drawer in the outdoor kitchen, where he kept bottle openers and spare sunscreen. With growing suspicion, Michael checked alerts from previous weeks. There it was last Tuesday when he'd attended an all-day conference downtown, and the Thursday before that during his dentist appointment, and 3 times the previous month, always during his regular grocery shopping time or scheduled gym sessions. The realization hit him like a physical blow. While Diane had been harassing him about his pool's supposed community impact, issuing violations and demanding modifications, she had been regularly trespassing to use that very same pool when she thought he wasn't home. As if to punctuate this hypocrisy, the final footage from Saturday showed Diane meticulously returning everything to its exact position, wiping down the surfaces she used and carefully checking her surroundings before slipping back through the gate. Violation notices about his. Michael spent that night cycling through emotions, shock, violation, rage, and finally calculated calm. His first instinct had been to confront Diane directly with the footage or even involve the police for the repeated trespassing. But years of debugging complex systems had taught him that the most elegant solutions required patience and strategic thinking. By morning, a plan had formed. Rather than exposing Diane immediately, he would create a scenario that would make her behavior undeniable to the entire community. No he said arguments, no appeals to her authority position, just irrefutable evidence presented in the most public way possible. The monthly HOA meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening. Michael arrived early, setting his laptop and coffee on the community center table with deliberate casualness. As other homeowners filtered in, he engaged in conversation with Bill Jenkins, a retired engineer who lived at the end of the street. Looking forward to getting away next week, Michael mentioned, voice pitched just loud enough to carry to where Diane was arranging her meeting materials. This tech conference in Seattle is perfectly timed, 3 full days away from screens and stress. He noticed Diane pause briefly in her paper shuffling, though she didn't look up. "When do you leave?" Bill asked. "Tuesday morning, back Friday night," Michael replied, catching the almost imperceptible nod of Diane's head as she made a note in her ever-present leather notebook. Seed planted, Michael spent the next 5 days implementing his technical solutions with the same focus he applied to challenging coding projects. He installed a second, more discreet security camera system with better angles on the pool area and gate entrance, carefully concealing the high-definition cameras within his landscaping. Next came the pool modifications. Michael contacted a specialty effects company that supplied theatrical productions and explained his situation. The technician, amused by the story, helped him install a custom system of non-toxic washable dye packets connected to his pool's filter system. The blue compound was skin-safe, dermatologist tested, and would gradually fade after 72 hours, but would be impossible to wash off completely for at least 2 days. For the audio element, Michael purchased waterproof speakers designed for marine use and positioned them beneath his pool deck, connecting them to his home automation system. He recorded several announcements in a formal, authoritative voice resembling those used for public transportation safety messages. The most complex component was configuring his home automation system to create a real-time response. Using his software engineering skills, Michael programmed a series of triggers. When motion was detected at the gate followed by pool area activity, the system would begin a countdown. After confirming sustained presence through multiple sensors, it would activate the full sequence of responses while simultaneously sending the live video feed to the HOA group chat, a digital communication channel Diane herself had insisted all homeowners join for efficient community notifications. Finally, Michael addressed the one flaw in his previous security, the occasionally unlocked gate. He replaced the standard lock with an electronic version that would send alerts to his phone if left unsecured and would automatically lock after 30 seconds of being closed. By Monday evening, all systems were tested and operational. Michael packed an overnight bag with purposeful thoroughness, loading it visibly into his car the next morning. He drove to the Oak Ridge Plaza at the neighborhood entrance and waited until he spotted Diane beginning her morning compliance walk before pulling onto the main road, ostensibly heading for the airport. Instead of Seattle, Michael checked into the Courtyard Marriott just 15 minutes from Oak Ridge Estates. He spent Tuesday working remotely, even posting a carefully staged photo to his rarely used Facebook account showing a Seattle skyline view, actually a stock photo with subtle filter adjustments, with the caption, Conference Eve Views. Looking forward to 3 days of tech talks. Hashtag Seattlebound, hashtag TechLife. Wednesday morning passed uneventfully. Michael monitored his security app while attending virtual meetings, explaining to colleagues that he was working from the conference during session breaks. At 1:42 p.m., the first alert pinged his phone. Someone had opened his side gate. Michael switched to the live feed, heart racing as he watched Diane slip into his backyard with familiar confidence. She carried the same beach towel and insulated bag from previous visits. He observed as she performed her now familiar routine, scanning the yard, arranging her belongings, and carefully checking her watch. This time, she seemed to linger longer at each step, her movements suggesting a more relaxed timeline. Evidently, his 3-day absence meant she felt comfortable extending her usual visit. When Diane finally slipped into the pool and began her customary laps, Michael initiated Phase 1. He switched the HOA group chat to live meeting mode, a feature Diane had insisted everyone enable for emergency broadcasts, and ensured the transmission was working properly. Then he activated the full sequence with a single command, execute protocol Karen. The underwater pool lights, normally a gentle blue, suddenly flashed a pulsing red. The speakers beneath the deck activated with a jarring alert tone followed by an authoritative voice. ATENTILN. You are ESPS on private PROPRTA. Your presence HSBENDTTT and authorities AVENNOTIFIE. Please exit immediately. The camera captured Diane's transformation from relaxed swimmer to panicked intruder in high definition. She thrashed for the pool stairs, eyes wide with shock, just as the dye packets released their payload into the filtration system. The clear water rapidly transformed to a vivid blue around her, clinging to her skin and swimsuit as she scrambled out of the pool. The speaker system continued its announcement. This PROPRT is monitored by SecurityWCYSTMs as APROVED in HOA Regulation 5.7. Your identity HSBN record DD and VDRFIE. 37 Oak Ridge Estates residents watched in real time as Diane Wilcox, HOA compliance officer and self-appointed guardian of community standards, frantically gathered her belongings while stained bright blue from neck to toe. The camera captured every moment as she struggled with the gate latch, leaving copal handprints on the white paint. Michael returned from his conference 2 days later, expressing appropriate surprise at the community uproar. By then, an emergency HOA meeting had been called. Ted Harrison, finally asserting his authority as president, had temporarily suspended Diane from the board pending a formal review. Mrs. Abernathy had organized a support group for victims of excessive compliance enforcement, which was meeting in the community center with surprising attendance. Within a week, formal consequences materialized. Diane was permanently removed from the HOA board, faced a community hearing about ethics violations, and received an official warning that trespassing charges would be filed if she ever entered another resident's property without explicit permission. The security footage, now legendary in neighborhood lore, had been witnessed by too many people for her to mount any effective defense. The most satisfying epilogue appeared in Michael's mailbox exactly 2 weeks after the incident, a community petition to establish monthly neighborhood pool days, where residents could sign up to host informal gatherings at their private pools. It was signed by every homeowner in Oak Ridge Estates, except for one. Diane Wilcox had put her house on the market, the for sale sign prominently featuring a different real estate agent than the one who handled local HOA-approved listings.